The red sky of planet Valdris burned like fire as explosions shook the ground beneath Captain Maya's boots. She held her 3-month-old baby boy close to her chest, feeling his tiny heart beating fast against hers. The sound of dragon wings filled the air above them, getting closer with each passing second. "Captain, we need to move now," shouted her second-in-command, his voice barely heard over the chaos. "The last transport is leaving in 2 minutes." Maya ran toward the evacuation zone, her baby crying louder as the noise grew overwhelming. When she reached the landing pad, her heart sank. The transport was already packed with wounded soldiers, their faces pale and bloody from the battle. There was no room left. The pilot looked at her with desperate eyes. "I'm sorry, Captain. We're at maximum weight. If we take any more people, we'll crash before we clear the atmosphere." Another explosion rocked the ground, this one much closer. Through the smoke, Maya could see the dark shapes of dragon riders swooping down toward their position. They had maybe 30 seconds before the enemy reached them. Maya looked at her baby, then at the overcrowded ship. Her mind raced through impossible choices. She could stay behind with her son and they would both die. She could force someone off the transport, but that would doom another person. "Oh! Take off now," she yelled to the pilot, then turned and ran away from the ship. Her legs carried her toward the nearby mountains, where she remembered seeing cave openings during their earlier missions. Her baby's cries echoed off the rock walls as she climbed higher, her lungs burning from the effort. Behind her, she heard the transport's engines roar to life. "Please, someone has to find you," she whispered to her son as she reached a sheltered cave entrance. "Someone good has to find you." She wrapped him in her military jacket, the one with her name badge still attached. For a moment, she just looked at his tiny face, memorizing every detail. Then she forced herself to turn away and run back down the mountain. Deep inside the cave system, something ancient stirred. The crying had woken Thyrilax from her rest. She was older than the war itself, older than the first humans who had arrived on Valdris. Her massive form, covered in scales that looked like polished black stone, moved carefully through the tunnels toward the sound. When she found the human baby, Thyrilax felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries. The tiny creature was so small, so helpless, lying there among the rocks. Near her own nesting chamber, her eggs waited to hatch in a few weeks. An instinct older than memory told her what to do. With incredible gentleness, the ancient dragon lifted the baby with one massive claw. She carried him to her nesting area and placed him carefully among her own eggs, where the temperature was perfect for young life to grow. The last human transport disappeared into the burning sky as dragon forces overran the abandoned settlement below. In the military records, one more name was added to the list of the missing and presumed dead. But in the depths of the mountain, something unprecedented was beginning. A human child was about to become part of a dragon family, setting in motion events that would change the fate of 2 species forever. 20 years would pass before the galaxy learned what happened when you raised a human baby as a dragon. 20 years before Maya would face the impossible truth of what her desperate choice had created. 20 years before her son would return riding something that legend said could reshape worlds. The war between humans and dragons had just taken a turn that neither side could have imagined. In saving her child the only way she could, Maya had unknowingly planted the seed for a future where the very meaning of humanity itself would be transformed. As the smoke cleared from the abandoned human settlement and dragon forces claimed another victory, none of them knew that the real battle for Valdris had only just begun. And it would be fought not with weapons or claws, but with the incredible power of love crossing the boundaries between species. The ancient dragon Thyrilax settled down to guard her expanded brood, unaware that she was about to raise the being who would one day bridge 2 worlds. In her protective embrace, a human baby slept peacefully for the first time since the war had torn his world apart. 20 years had changed everything on Valdris. The tiny human baby who once cried in a dragon's cave was now a young man named Kai, standing 6 feet tall with dark skin that shimmered with strange patterns. These weren't tattoos, they were marks that had appeared naturally as he grew up, looking almost like dragon scales but somehow beautiful on his human features. "You're still thinking like a ground crawler," rumbled his dragon brother, Vex, during their morning hunt. The massive red dragon was only slightly older than Kai but already the size of a small building. "You need to think bigger, like the sky itself." Kai laughed, dodging a playful swipe from Vex's enormous claw. "Maybe thinking small is exactly what you need, brother. Remember what happened at Thunder Ridge?" Vex snorted, sending small puffs of flame from his nostrils. He did remember Thunder Ridge, where enemy dragons had tried to take over their territory 3 years ago. While all the young dragons had prepared for a massive battle, Kai had studied the mountain's layout and came up with something completely different. Instead of fighting head-on, Kai had guided their family to use the mountain's natural heat vents. When the enemy dragons breathed fire, the heated air created updrafts that threw them off balance. What should have been a devastating battle became an embarrassing defeat for their enemies, all because a human had thought of something no dragon would have considered. The small thinking trick worked once, Vex admitted grudgingly. But what happens when you face a real challenge? That challenge came sooner than expected. From deeper in the cave system, Thyrilax's ancient voice reached them through the mental connection all dragons shared. My children, come quickly. Something stirs in the deep places that has slept since the world was young. Kai felt it too, but differently than his dragon family. Where they sensed only vague unease, he felt something like a massive heartbeat pulsing through the rock beneath their feet. It was as if the planet itself was trying to wake up from a long dream. When they reached Thyrilax's chamber, the ancient dragon looked troubled in a way Kai had never seen before. Her massive head, easily the size of a small house, turned toward her adopted human son with concern in her golden eyes. The deep songs grow stronger, young one. Something calls from the planet's heart, and I fear it speaks a language that only you might understand. Over the years, Kai had developed abilities that amazed even Thyrilax. He could speak mind to mind with dragons, but also with the smaller creatures of Valdris, the crystal birds that lived in the mountain peaks, the rootworms that helped plants grow, even the tiny organisms in the planet's soil. Sometimes it felt like every living thing on the world was connected in a vast web, and he was the only one who could sense all the threads. It's not scary, Kai said, placing his hand against the cave wall. Through the rock, he could feel something vast and patient, like a giant that had been sleeping for thousands of years. Whatever's down there, it's not angry. It's just lonely. His dragon siblings didn't understand how Kai could know such things, but they had learned to trust his strange insights. When he said the mountain storms would change direction, they always did. When he warned that certain valleys would flood, the family always moved their herd to higher ground in time. But this feeling was different. Stronger. It pulsed through the planetary network like a distress call, and Kai realized with growing alarm that something was causing the sleeping giant pain. They're hurting it, he said suddenly, his eyes widening with understanding. The humans, they're trying to dig down to it, but they don't know what they're doing. Thyrilax's massive form tensed. The war between dragons and humans had continued for 20 years, with neither side gaining a permanent advantage. The humans had retreated to their final stronghold, but their technology had grown more desperate and dangerous. If the Deep Ones wake in anger, Thyrilax said slowly, it will mean the end of all life on Valdris. Dragon and human alike. Kai felt the weight of an impossible choice settling on his shoulders. He was neither fully human nor fully dragon, but something unique that belonged to both worlds. His human creativity combined with dragon wisdom had solved problems before, but this was bigger than territorial disputes or hunting strategies. Somewhere far below, in the depths of the planet, ancient beings were stirring. And somewhere on the surface, his birth mother's people were unknowingly threatening to wake forces that could destroy everything he loved. For the first time in his life, Kai realized that being the bridge between two worlds might require him to choose between them. The lonely call from the deep places was growing stronger, and time was running out for everyone on Valdris. General Maya Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of humanity's last drilling platform, watching massive machines tear into the bedrock of Valdris. 20 years of war had reduced her people from millions to just a few thousand survivors, but their desperation had made them incredibly clever. What they lacked in numbers, they now made up for with technology that could reshape entire landscapes. General, the deep scans are showing something incredible, called out Lieutenant Ashley Chen from her station. The young woman's fingers danced across holographic displays that showed cross-sections of the planet far below. There are structures down there the size of entire cities. They're not natural formations. Maya studied the readouts with tired eyes. 2 decades of fighting dragons had aged her beyond her years, and the guilt of losing her infant son still haunted her dreams. Every night, she wondered if she had made the right choice that terrible day at the evacuation site. How deep? She asked. Nearly 10 miles down. But here's the strange part, they're showing energy signatures. Whatever's down there, it's not completely dead. The drilling operation had been going on for 6 months. Humanity's scientists believed that these massive buried structures might be some kind of ancient weapon system, something powerful enough to finally end the war with the dragons. They were wrong, but they wouldn't discover their mistake until it was almost too late. Dr. James Wilson, the project's lead scientist, hurried over with excitement written all over his face. General, We've broken through into the first chamber. The energy readings are off the charts. If we can figure out how to control whatever's down there, we might actually win this war. What they didn't know was that their crude drilling and electrical probing was causing agony to something that had slept peacefully for thousands of years. The Colossi weren't weapons, they were living beings, ancient beyond measure, who had helped shape Valdris itself when the planet was young. Miles away in the dragon territories, Kai suddenly collapsed in the middle of teaching young dragon hatchlings how to hunt crystal birds. The pain that shot through him wasn't his own, it came through the planetary network he had learned to sense over the years. Every living thing on Valdris felt it too, but none as clearly as he did. The Deep One screams, he gasped, his hands pressed against his temples. They're hurting it with fire and metal. Thyrilax's ancient voice filled his mind with concern. The Skyfire makers have found the sleeping guardians. This cannot be allowed to continue. Around them, other dragons were beginning to feel the distress calls too. Across the planet, every member of their species suddenly turned toward the human drilling site with growing alarm. The sleeping Colossus was calling out in pain, and its distress was waking others of its kind buried in different locations. I have to stop them, Kai said, struggling to his feet. They don't understand what they are doing. You cannot go to the humans, Thyrilax warned. They will see only an enemy. They will kill you before you can speak. But Kai was already moving. His hybrid nature allowed him to translate the Colossus's pain into something approaching human language, and what he understood terrified him. The ancient being wasn't just hurt, it was confused and afraid. And its panic was spreading to others of its kind across the planet. If I don't try, everyone dies, he said simply. The journey to the human drilling site took him 2 days of hard travel through territories that had seen constant warfare. When he finally crested the ridge overlooking the massive operation, Kai saw members of his birth species for the first time since he was a baby. They were smaller than he had expected, more fragile-looking than dragons, but their technology was impressive even to his dragon-trained eyes. The drilling platform rose like a metal mountain from the scarred landscape, surrounded by defensive positions and energy shields. But what struck him most was how determined they looked. These weren't conquerors or destroyers, they were survivors, fighting for their lives with everything they had. Just like his dragon family had been doing for 20 years. Kai approached the perimeter openly, his hands raised in what he hoped they would recognize as a peaceful gesture. He had practiced human speech during quiet moments over the years, working from fragments of memory and the mental impressions he sometimes picked up from the planetary network. The first human sentry who spotted him through binoculars went very still. Then alarms began blaring across the entire facility. Unknown contact approaching the north perimeter. The voice crackled over communication systems. Humanoid figure, but something's not right about it. Maya Rodriguez grabbed her rifle and rushed to the observation deck. Through her scope, she saw a tall young man walking toward their position with confident strides. But there was something strange about his appearance. Patterns on his skin that caught the light like scales, and eyes that seemed to glow with their own inner fire. "What are your orders, General?" asked her security chief. Maya studied the approaching figure more carefully. Something about the way he moved, the structure of his face, seemed hauntingly familiar. But that was impossible, wasn't it? "Hold your fire," she said quietly. "Let's see what he wants." Below them, the drilling continued, and deep in the earth, the first Colossus screamed in languages older than civilization itself. The moment Kai stepped into the perimeter lights, everything went wrong. The human guards saw his scaled skin patterns and glowing eyes, and 20 years of war training kicked in instantly. They thought he was some kind of dragon shapeshifter sent to infiltrate their base. "Hostile contact," someone shouted. "Opening fire." Bullets whistled through the air around Kai, but his dragon-trained reflexes allowed him to dodge with impossible speed. He rolled behind a boulder, his heart pounding as he realized his peaceful approach had failed completely. "Wait! Stop shooting!" he called out in perfect English, his voice carrying clearly across the battlefield. "I'm here to help you." The gunfire stopped abruptly. The human soldiers looked at each other in confusion. The creature they thought was a dragon spy was speaking their language without any accent, like someone who had grown up among them. General Maya Rodriguez pushed through her security team, her rifle trained on Kai's position. Something about his voice made her chest tight with an emotion she couldn't identify. "What are you?" she demanded, stepping closer despite her soldiers' protests. Kai slowly stood up, keeping his hands visible. "I'm the person you need right now. The creature you're drilling toward, you're torturing it. And if you don't stop, it's going to wake up others just like it all across the planet." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath their feet began to shake violently. In the distance, a mountain peak cracked and split as something enormous pushed up from below. The humans' drilling had finally driven the buried Colossus beyond its breaking point. "Dear God," whispered Dr. Wilson, staring at his instruments. "The energy readings just spiked off our sensors. Something's coming up from Sector 7. Maya kept her weapon aimed at Kai, but her tactical mind was already processing what he had said. "You're telling me those structures we found are alive?" "They're called Colossi," Kai explained, his voice tight with strain as another wave of psychic pain washed over him. "They're ancient beings that helped shape this planet. Your machines are like needles jabbing into a sleeping giant's brain." The shaking got worse, and cracks began appearing in the drilling platform's support structures. Through the growing chaos, Maya found herself studying Kai's face more carefully. There was something about his features, the way he held his head when concentrating, that stirred memories she had tried to bury for 20 years. "How do we stop it?" she asked, making a command decision that surprised her own troops. "The only way is through bonding," Kai said. "But it requires someone who can speak to both the deep consciousness and the surface world. Someone who belongs to both species." As if summoned by his words, the first Colossus erupted from the earth about a mile away. It was like watching a living mountain being born, crystalline formations mixed with stone and what looked like organic tissue, all pulsing within a light. The creature's roar shook the air itself, a sound of pain and confusion that made everyone cover their ears. Maya watched in amazement as Kai didn't run from the terrifying sight, but started walking toward it with steady purpose. "Son, are you insane?" she called after him, the words slipping out before she could stop herself. Kai paused and turned back to look at her. In that moment, despite all the changes 20 years had brought, Maya Rodriguez saw something impossible. The bone structure of his face, the way his eyes crinkled slightly when he was thinking, features she had memorized during 3 precious months of motherhood. "Mom?" The word came out as barely a whisper. The recognition hit them both like lightning. Maya's rifle dropped from suddenly nerveless fingers as 20 years of guilt and grief crashed over her. Her baby boy, the one she had abandoned in a cave to save his life, was standing before her transformed into something beyond her wildest imagination. "Is it really you?" she whispered, tears streaming down her battle-scarred face. "It's me," Kai said simply. "And I understand why you had to make that choice. But right now, I need to save everyone you're trying to protect." Another Colossus was stirring in the distance, and the one nearest to them was moving closer, its massive form leaving canyon-deep footprints in the ground. Its crystalline eyes blazed with confusion and anger. "How?" Maya asked. "How can you possibly stop something that size?" "By becoming what I was always meant to be," Kai replied. "I'm not fully human or fully dragon. I'm something new, a bridge between all the life on this planet." He walked toward the approaching Colossus with calm determination. Maya wanted to run after him, to protect the son she had found and lost in the same moment, but her soldiers held her back. "Let him go, General," said Sergeant Davis quietly. "I think he's the only chance any of us have." As Kai reached the massive creature, it stopped its destructive rampage and lowered its enormous head to study this small figure who showed no fear. For a moment that felt like eternity, the two beings, one ancient beyond measure, one barely 20 years old, stared into each other's eyes. Then Kai reached out and placed his hand on the Colossus's crystalline surface, and everything changed. The moment Kai touched the Colossus, lightning seemed to flow between them. His body convulsed as his consciousness merged with the ancient being's vast mind, experiencing memories that stretched back millions of years. The pain was incredible, like trying to pour an ocean into a cup, but somehow his hybrid nature allowed him to survive what would have destroyed any normal human or dragon. For 3 days and nights, Kai remained connected to the creature while it towered motionless over the human base. Maya refused to leave the observation deck, watching her son with a mixture of pride and terror. The other colossi that had been stirring across the planet gradually fell silent, as if waiting to see what would happen. "His vital signs are all over the place," Dr. Wilson reported, monitoring Kai with long-range sensors. "His brain activity is unlike anything we've ever recorded. It's as if he's thinking with 2 minds at once." On the morning of the 4th day, something extraordinary happened. The Colossus began to change, its crystalline surface flowing like liquid as it reshaped itself. Where before it had been a chaotic mass of stone and crystal, it now formed elegant structures that looked almost architectural. And at the center of it all, Kai emerged, but he was no longer quite the same person who had walked into that bonding. His appearance hadn't changed much, but there was something different in his eyes now. They held depths that spoke of vast spaces and deep time. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in people's bones. "Hello, Mom," he said, looking directly at Maya across the distance. "I'm sorry I kept you waiting." The Colossus moved with fluid grace now, no longer the confused and angry creature that had terrified everyone. As it walked toward the human base, each step left behind not destruction, but strange new growths, crystalline trees that pulsed with gentle light, perfectly geometric pools of water that seemed impossibly clean. "What happened to him?" Maya whispered. "He's become something new," Dr. Wilson said, studying his readings with amazement. The bonding didn't just let him control the Colossus, it made them into partners. Two consciousness working as one. When Kai climbed down from his massive companion, Maya ran to meet him despite her soldiers' protests. Up close, she could see that he was still her son, but there was an otherworldly quality to him now that was both wonderful and slightly frightening. "I can feel everything now," he explained as she embraced him. "Every living thing on Valdris is connected through networks you never imagined. The dragons always knew pieces of it, but humans never learned to listen." Over the following weeks, something miraculous began to happen. Through Kai's unique ability to communicate with both species, the war that had raged for 20 years simply ended. Not through victory or defeat, but through understanding. Dragons who had spent decades fighting humans suddenly found themselves experiencing human memories of loss and determination. Human soldiers felt the patient wisdom of creatures who had lived for centuries. The hatred that had fueled the conflict dissolved when both sides finally understood what they had been fighting about. "We thought they were trying to destroy our world," explained Commander Torres during one of the first peace meetings. "We never realized they saw us as the destroyers." Thyrilax herself came to the human base, her massive form causing initial panic until Kai introduced her as his mother. The scene of two mothers, one human, one dragon, meeting to discuss their shared son became the symbol of the new age beginning on Valdris. But Kai's vision extended far beyond just one planet. Using the quantum communication networks that humanity had developed during the war, he began sending messages to other human colonies scattered across the galaxy. Each transmission carried more than just words, it included emotional resonance that proved what he was saying was real. The responses came back quickly. Ship after ship began arriving at Valdris, not as conquerors or refugees, but as students eager to learn. They came from colonies that had been fighting their own wars, facing their own impossible challenges, all looking for a new way forward. Captain Rivera of the Earth Defense Force was among the first to arrive. As her ship entered orbit, she stared in amazement at what she saw below. Humans and dragons were working together to build cities that seemed to grow from the landscape itself. The awakened colossi moved like living mountains, their massive forms reshaping entire continents with geological precision. "Control, are you seeing this?" she radioed back to her fleet. "They've got dragons helping them construct buildings, and those giant creatures are creating new mountain ranges like it's nothing." Kai's voice filled her bridge, warm with welcome and infinite patience. "Hello, cousin. Welcome to Valdris. We have so much to show you about what humanity can become when we stop fighting the universe and start working with it." As more ships arrived from across human space, each crew saw the same impossible sight. A young man who had been raised by dragons, bonded to ancient planetary guardians, was teaching his species that their greatest strength wasn't in conquest or domination, but in their incredible ability to adapt and build bridges between any forms of life they encountered. Maya Rodriguez stood beside her son as another transport landed, watching as humans and dragons worked together to welcome the newcomers. 20 years ago, she had made an impossible choice to save one baby's life. Now she was watching that choice change the future of humanity itself. Was it worth it? Kai asked quietly, sensing her thoughts through their renewed connection. Maya smiled, tears of joy replacing the tears of guilt she had carried for so long. Every single moment of pain was worth seeing this. Above them, the Colossus hummed a song that carried across continents, a melody of welcome that every living thing on Valdris could feel in their hearts.